there's only one way to lead, and that is by personal example. People don't realize how important it is for the boss to be present. The best team I've ever been on is the U.S. Army team, and that's what it is. The Army is a team. I'm General Mike Garrett. I am Coach to Win.
So our next guest is not technically a coach, but he's a coach at the highest level. I'm talking about 4-star General Mike Garrett, retired, by the way. He was a former commanding general of U.S. Army Forces Command, also known as FORSCOM. You're going to learn a lot about what that is because we're talking about 1 million people this guy is in charge of. Very impressive. I can't wait for you to hear Mike talk because he is so smart, so knowledgeable, and so inspiring. This guy has done everything, and he has done it the hard way. I mean, he worked his butt off to get to the top. And there are 3 coaching points I want you to pay attention to when you're listening to Mike talk. Here's the first one. Why he hates hypocrites. It's one. What does coaching by walking around mean? And this is my favorite one. And you parents out there, you're coaches, you're going to love this one. Why doesn't former 4-star General Mike Garrett ever walk by trash? Here it is. If you're ready, I'm ready.
I'm always ready.
Okay. I know. I guess you probably, that goes with your job too, by the way. Like you always got to be ready. If you can't be ready, how are the people you're in command of not going to be ready?
That's right. Well, it kind of goes with my whole life. My dad was in the Army for 35 years and I'm the oldest and, the only boy in the house. And, my dad told me when I was, I was probably 11 or 12. He looks at me, he goes, Mike, anything ever happens to your sisters, I'll break your back.
Wait, isn't that why you had to go to Xavier University?
No, that's not why.
Okay, because I heard a story that you didn't necessarily want to go to Xavier, but your dad was kind of like to your point. Hey, listen, you're going there to watch after your sister.
Well, no, that is partially true, which is encouraging to me. You're talking to people that actually know me. No, I started off, neither of my parents, I'm a first generation college grad. Neither of my parents went to college. And so, my dad was stationed in Germany when I was graduating from high school. And, and I was a pretty good athlete. I was the Baumholder American Athlete of the Year for 2-3 years in a row. But, there was no real recruiting in Germany.
Yeah.
And, there probably wasn't much of a market for 145 pound, quarterback, kicker. I played every position pretty much on the team. It was that kind of team. But anyways, I went back home and, my dad said, all right, we're going to plan B. And plan B meant, I went to night school for a semester, got a job. And then when my sister was accepted at Xavier, my dad did not. That's the part that you kind of got right. My dad did not want her to go alone. And so, and at this time, my grades were actually pretty good. And I was accepted at Xavier, and that begins the rest of the history.
So I know we just jumped into talking like we've been best friends forever, and I think I mentioned this to you, but I want to make sure, us civilians, should I just call you Mike, or would you rather us call you General Garrett?
I'd rather be called Mike.
Okay.
That's how I sign everything now.
Well, see, here's what I do. And so we'll call you Mike today. I still feel like I'm being disrespectful to you after I read this list of accomplishments. And so when you start blushing, I'm going to stop. Okay. Because what I do, like when I get introduced, usually if I go to an event or speaking, whatever I do, right, it's 2-time Super Bowl champion, Christian Fauria. So let me just read some of the list of your accomplishments because I want I don't think, our listeners fully grasp the accomplishments. Commanded at every level, Army Service Component Command, led units in combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, Ranger, Pathfinder, Jump Master, Company Commander in Korea, where you commanded 240 troops, Battalion Commander, 82nd Airborne, Brigade Commander, commanded 4th Brigade Combat Team, Airborne. Some of your assignments include Chief of Staff of U.S. Central Command, Commanding General of United States Army, Alaska, multiple joint and operational tours, staff assignments at numerous levels, as well as several commands. Are you blushing yet? I know you probably don't like all these accolades. Hold on, I'm not done yet, Mike. Then, and I think this may be the crown jewel of your achievement, but you'll have to tell me. Then in 2019, you were promoted to Commanding General of the United States Army Forces Command, also known as ForceCom. That's a lot. What is ForceCom for people who don't have a clue what that's about? It's pretty daunting what you were responsible for.
Yeah, so Forces Command is one of the 4 commands that really run the Army on any given day. And Forces Command consisted of most of the Army, all of the reserves, and the Guard when mobilized. And so 750,000, soldiers is the number that I use. But it really provides, what we did on a day-to-day basis was provide trained, equipped, ready formations to meet global requirements.
Hold on. Before we go any farther, make sure you click that subscribe button real quick and turn on your notifications. All right, here we go. Back to the show. Let's just start from the beginning, Mike. Why the military? What was it about the military that was appealing to you?
Christian, it's interesting. My wife, Lorela, and I talk about this all the time because, today my daughter is married to a captain in the 82nd Airborne Division. My son is a captain in the 82nd Airborne Division. He went to West Point. And I asked my wife, I'm like, hey, why, I wanted my son to go to Berkeley. I had pictures of me sitting around in my Birkenstocks, hanging out there, but he chose West Point. And I think it's a reason that I chose the Army. My dad, I've been in the Army, in and around the Army my entire life. My dad was in the Army for 35 years. I have no memories of not being on a military installation. It's where I grew up. It's the people that I grew up with. I mean, I think I won't say it was my destiny, but I'll tell you that I don't think I even considered anything else seriously, my junior and senior year at Xavier University, other than the Army. I mean, I just knew it was something that maybe early on I felt compelled to do. And I remember, I had a 2-year ROTC scholarship. And to validate that scholarship, I had to go to ROTC basic training. And I remember this platoon sergeant. He goes, Garrett, you've got as much potential as I have ever seen. And this isn't, in today's day and age, I probably wouldn't say this, but I'm just quoting him. But what he said is, you're a shitty Indian. and his point was, I was not a good team player. Right. His point was that, it seemed like, it was about me and not about the people that I was serving with. These are other cadets. And, I'll tell you what, I went back and thought about that. And the following summer, we went to the next iteration of this. And my whole focus was on being as helpful as I possibly could to members of the team.
Let me go back real quick to the genesis of this story. I'm interested in the technique your commanding officer. It was almost like a passive aggressive dig to get you to realize like what your potential was and how you were screwing up. I'm interested to know, did you feel ashamed? Were you angry that you kind of, weren't paying attention to what was important?
No. And the reason I think is because, I grew up around my father and my father didn't mince words. I always knew, and, with my dad, I always knew what the standards were, what the expectations were. And he always gave me good feedback on, if I did well or if I was deficient somewhere. There were people from all over the country there, and there were several folks that I just didn't really care for. They weren't in the shape that I thought they should have been in. They didn't know some of the things that I thought they should have known. And I think that's what, pushed me maybe to act in the way that I did. But what he told me that day, stuck with me for the rest of my career, in terms of, this is never, ever going to be about you. And it's always going to be better if you are able to establish a good relationship with your peers, because, you're going to find yourself needing them more often than they need you.
I think that's such an important lesson. And which brings me to my next question for you, because you have been influenced by a lot of smart people, but probably a lot of people that you respect. And you served with former Secretary of State Colin Powell, and he was famous for his management by walking around. I'm curious to know what that is and why it's important.
So now, Christian, I get to spend a lot of time with, senior corporate leaders and executives. I also spend a lot of time with senior military folks, and I hope the military continues to allow me to share, what I've learned with our up and coming generals. One of the things that I learned early on, and again, it's by working for some great leaders, but there is nothing more important than your personal presence. And people don't realize how important it is for the boss to be present. It's easy. When I was a brand new second lieutenant and was responsible for 30 men, it's easy to know not only their names, but their wives' names, their kids' names, to have in a notebook when birthdays were, because that was the expectation. It's a little bit harder when you start talking about 1,000, 4,000, 20,000, and then 750,000. But you know what? It's harder, but it doesn't excuse you from figuring out how best to do it. And so this management by walking around, it's really not, I don't like the term management, right?
We can call it coaching by walking around. How about that? Let's tie it all together.
But it's really, it goes back to, something that I learned early on and I think about most days, and that's leading by personal example. I tell people all the time, there's only one way to lead in our Army. And now I'm expanding that beyond the Army, because my life has expanded beyond the Army. But even in this new world that I find myself in, it still stays the same. There's only one way to lead, and that is by personal example. The other thing that people don't realize is, I commanded a battalion in the 82nd, as you said. I had 750 paratroopers, and I remember my boss, who was a colonel at the time, counseling me, and he goes, "Mike," "when you get to be a brigade commander, you're not going to be able to command the way that you command your battalion." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Every single one of your paratroopers." And I thought to myself, I said, he thinks I know every single one of my paratroopers. But you know what? So did they. And so when I went on to command a brigade of 4,000 people, I wanted every one of them to know me personally. When I went on to be the ForceCom commander, and, it's impossible for 750,000 people to personally know you, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. And so my point is, in this leadership by interacting, with the people that you lead is important. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about things that are important to me, but, I hate hypocrites. And it's the one thing that I think about every single day. The audio and the video have got to always be in alignment. The other thing is, I learned early on that 30 seconds of my time is something that a soldier might remember for the rest of their lives. I mean, I bump into people all the time Now it's in airports. General Garrett, how are you?
Yeah.
And, and now that I'm old, I can say, hey, can you help remind me where we met? And they'll go, oh, sure. We were in the motor pool 20 years ago. And you know what? When I walk away from those, I really feel good about, what I've done, because, I know guys that if I saw them in an airport, if I could chuck an egg at them, I would, in some cases. So it means a lot to me that people continue to reach out, to Mike Garrett. And it just reminds me that every interaction matters. Your personal interaction, your personal presence matters and can't be understated.
So, I mean, you mentioned hypocrites. Would that be one of your pet peeves?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What would be another one that is just, because I'm curious what your non-negotiables are. Like a lot of coaches have them, make sure you're early, make sure you're, polite. What are your pet peeves? What are your non-negotiables as a leader?
Well, I think the big one and really, hypocrisy encompasses everything, right? Because it's not just other people, it's yourself. It allows me to check myself every day.
So wait, why do people do it? Why is there a fear of being honest and authentic? Don't you think that, especially, I would say especially from, a soldier or a player, an athlete that has a coach or somebody who has a boss, I would think that honesty is probably like the number one thing. So everybody is on the same page and nobody feels like they're being taken advantage of. I mean, I would think that would endear your soldiers to you more.
It does. And it's expected. But I mean, think about it. It gets hard. When you are leading 30 people, they see you from the time you show up in the morning to the time you leave in the evening. And then depending on where you are, you bump into them on the weekend. The things that you say are important to you. For instance, I don't walk past trash. That's kind of my little thing.
No, you literally you see a candy wrapper on the ground, you stop and pick it up.
I can't walk by it. And here's why. You know why? Because I said I don't walk past trash. And every time, because let me tell you, sometimes it's a pain in the ass, right? Because sometimes there's no trash receptacles. And I put limits on myself now. My wife won't let me pick up dirty underwear, right? Or socks, right? She says, look, don't touch that. And now, I'm a little bit more strategic. I'm looking for a trash can before I pick it up. But the point is, nobody's watching me. There's nobody. They don't even know who I am here in Charlotte. But you know what? I see the piece of trash. And there have been some mornings it's raining or something. I'm like, I'm just going to keep walking. I get like 2 or 3 steps by it. And I go, you hypocrite, right? So this is just a way, and it's a very simple way to remind myself that, there are a lot of people who have invested in Mike Garrett. There are a lot of people who listen to Mike Garrett. I just do everything that I can, and I'm not perfect, but I do everything that I can to make sure that, what comes out of my mouth matches what people see.
So with that, how do you identify somebody who has leadership qualities? What are you looking for?
It's in young people, I'm looking for confidence. I'm looking for, a young person who is confident in themselves. I'm looking for a young person who is inquisitive. And this is something I always get beat up on. I've always been about being physically fit. And so that was kind of a deal breaker for me. If you were, and I don't know who's going to watch this, but
a lot of people, Mike, a lot of people.
Yeah. But I hope, but I've got a reputation for, I'll say chunky people, right?
Yeah.
Because the Army, the Army's all about standards. And I've walked up to a lot of people, and not to embarrass, I pull them off to the side, but I tell them like, hey man, or hey, you do not look like our Army standard. And what I told them was, I said, here's the deal. I said, your privates are looking at you. And they're going, all right, the Army keeps telling us that we got to be able to do this many push-ups, this many sit-ups. We got to be able to run this far, and I can't weigh more than this. But look at this fat guy or gal. People that say, fitness is important, for instance. And going back to what I look for in leaders. So you got to be fit.
Yeah.
You got to be smart, right? I mean, this is a thinking person's business. And I said the confidence piece, got to have good character. But, I'm to the point now where, God gave me a number of strengths, I think. And one of them is, I love people. He gave me a love for people. And, over the years, I've gotten pretty good at being able to, evaluate folks, pretty quick. I didn't get it right all the time. And, the times that I didn't get it right were because, there was somebody that was maybe a little bit chunky, but then we're out running and they go right by me. Right. And so that caused me to reevaluate. In some cases, caused me to go back and apologize. But that's what I'm looking for, in a leader.
In sports, coaches, they're always talking about building culture, right? Getting the right guys in, having the right mindset. How important is culture? How do you build it? Like it can't be easy.
No. And I'll tell you, it's everything. It's everything. As I look over my career, I've been in one unit that was horribly led. But even with the worst leader on the planet, in my view, at that time, that unit was still a very strong unit. And I think it was the culture of the unit, the culture of our Army, that allowed for that to happen. I don't know if it was 2019, but, when we had the George Floyd incident and, several other incidents in our country, the Army went on this campaign to make sure that, one, we understood the importance of diversity in our formations, that we were embracing the diversity in our formations. And I actually thought that it was a waste of time, right? Because our Army is a direct reflection of our country. It's diverse because it's our Army. But I tell you what, I did what I was told to do. And, there were many days, Ardennes Street is I'll take you, Christian. If you ever come visit me in Charlotte, we'll go drive down to Fort Liberty, which used to be Fort Bragg. But Ardennes is a street that the 82nd Airborne Division is on. And when I was at FORSCOM on the other side of the post on Fridays, my 6.5 mile run would take me down Ardennes. So during this time, what I would do is I would run over there, and then I would find a good ambush position, and I would wait for a slow unit to run, and then I would. It used to be when I was younger, I'd run up and down the street because I could outrun everybody, but didn't do that when I was old. So I had to be a little bit more strategic. But I would catch these guys, we'd run for a little bit, then I'd pull them off to the side, and it was just so neat talking to these kids. I mean, think about a black soldier, white soldier, and I asked the guy, I'm like, hey, tell me about Garrett. And he goes, oh, Garrett's a good guy, he's from wherever he's from. Then I'll ask him, I said, hey, how many black friends did you have growing up? Because I didn't have any black friends growing up. I grew up in Iowa somewhere. And, the first black people that, I really interacted with was at basic training. But what I learned from a number of those engagements is what I already knew. That what builds culture in the Army is the Army mission, right? The Army exists for one reason. That's to fight and win our nation's wars. There is a task, condition, and standard for everything that you do in the Army. What changes, though, in all of those things are the conditions, right? You can do that at 9 o'clock in the morning, 75 degrees, beautiful day. Or you could do it at 2 o'clock in the morning in a driving snowstorm. But guess what? The task doesn't change and the standards don't change. And that's what happened here. And so I think that helps with the culture. I think the hierarchical, the rank structure helps with the culture. I mean, you still have to earn the respect and trust of your subordinates, but you start off with that trust because you're Lieutenant Garrett or because you're Sergeant Garrett. And then you can either lose it or, build up on it.
I can really kind of understand you have a terrible leader, you have a terrible boss, a terrible coach, and the camaraderie and the unity and the togetherness is so strong, it almost overpowers the terrible decisions that the coach or the boss makes. That's because, I feel like those situations are rare. Yeah. It's really hard to get that many people in a building from so many diverse neighborhoods, social classes, race, you name it, and they all are just kind of understanding what the real goal is, and they win anyways. That's in right. Spite of their leadership. That to me, you get a group like that. You're going to win a lot.
The best team I've ever been on is the U.S. Army team. And that's what it is. The Army is a team. I mean, we're talking about coaching here. I mean, we have people who are paid to coach. We call them observer, controller, trainer / coaches, right? So it is part of the fabric of our military.
There's just a couple more things for me because I know we've kept you much longer than we said we would. A couple of things that I'm constantly coaching in my house, and the two things that seems to be the most difficult to coach. One is body language, which is one of my pet peeves. And the other one is self-doubt, like that negative voice that keeps creeping into people's minds and just that lowers their self-esteem and it just like lowers their ability to succeed, right? Because they just don't believe in themselves. I'm curious how you would handle those two situations.
Yeah, so I told you, and anybody that, so when you go back and talk to or bump into people that know Mike Garrett and have worked for me, they'll tell you about my not walking past trash, and it's literal and it's figurative. The figurative part of that is, what you just alluded to, right? The trash talk in your own head, or walking by something that is wrong, but you failed to do something about it. Those are the other parts of, of this not walking past trash and not being, a hypocrite. I think, discipline is important. I mean, I told you what my dad said at the very beginning of this, and my dad didn't mince words, and so although it was painful, literally and figuratively, growing up, I learned a lot from that, and so when I was raising my own kids. Same thing, right? What I told my kids was, hey, always tell the truth. Look people in the eye when you talk to them.
That's another one. That's another one. That's a pet peeve of mine also. Look them in the eye.
Look people in the eye, when you talk to them. And if you have a really, really, really hard question, ask your mom.
Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah.
I like that one. That one's great. So if you had to recommend a book to somebody, what would it be and why?
I would tell you to read a book by, I read all the time. I mean, right now I'm on another Isaac Asimov kick. I love Isaac Asimov. And there are sci-fi people out there who will know who Isaac Asimov is. But I would recommend, if you want to get a sense for like the evolution and development of a young officer, read Just Another Day in Vietnam by Keith Nightingale.
Okay.
And I'll leave it at that. It is, he was one of my old bosses, and he's written a number of books, but this is a book about his experience as a lieutenant in Vietnam, and it's just phenomenal.
Okay. Yeah, then we're going to make sure we add that into our link when we're done in our next segment. So your 3 core leadership principles.
I don't use those words specifically.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I know. I'm just throwing darts.
But the first is don't be a hypocrite, right?
Yeah.
Because I just think that's all encompassing. Not only.
How did I miss that one? We talked about it for 10 minutes.
The second is, gets back to this leading by example and being present. And the third is, this would not have been on this list, maybe 15, 20 years ago. But the more senior, I became in the military, simplifying complexity. Everything that we do is complex. And, there are some people out there that'll turn, they can write a book on chewing a piece of gum or, walking down the sidewalk. But the best leaders that I have seen in the military and now, in corporate America are those that can take very, very complex concepts and state them simply so that not only are they easily understood, but the action that you want to happen as a result happens.
So we used to have this thing on some of the teams I played on in the NFL to this point, is that if you don't know what to do, just kiss. And it simply meant keep it simple, stupid.
That's right. That's right.
Try to live by that in most of the things I do in my life. This has been just so insightful and better than I can ever imagine. So I want to just thank you for your time.
Oh, Christian, thanks for inviting me. As I said before, this new life of mine, I love it. I'm meeting all kinds of new people. I'm being exposed to different parts of America and things that are important to our country that I just didn't have the opportunity to do in the Army. And this is one of them. So thank you, Christian, for inviting me.